Imagine for a moment that you are 1% better at something today than you were yesterday. Not dramatically better. Not transformed. Just 1%. By tomorrow night, you will barely notice the difference, and the day after that, you might be tempted to say that nothing has changed at all. This is the quiet tragedy of self-improvement, and also its quiet miracle. Because if you keep that 1% going, day after day, the math does something strange and almost unbelievable. 1% better every day for a year does not make you 3 or 4 times better. It makes you roughly 37 times better. And 1% worse every day, the slow erosion most of us never notice, brings you down to nearly nothing over the same span of time. The difference between the person who rises and the person who declines is not a single heroic decision. It is the accumulation of hundreds of tiny, almost invisible choices, repeated until they harden into a life. This is the central, almost stubborn insistence of Atomic Habits by James Clear, a book that has sold many millions of copies and become something close to a modern manual for changing your behavior. The promise of the book is deceptively modest. It does not tell you to find your purpose, summon your willpower, or undergo a dramatic awakening. Instead, it asks you to pay attention to the smallest unit of your day, the habit, and to engineer it so carefully that change becomes almost automatic. The word atomic in the title carries 2 meanings at once. An atom is tiny, the smallest building block. But atomic is also the language of immense energy, of forces that, once released, reshape everything around them. Clear is making a wager that the smallest things arranged well contain the largest power. In the next several minutes, I want to take that wager apart, examine what holds it up, where it shines, and where you might want to be a little skeptical. James Clear did not arrive at this subject as a detached academic. He arrived through pain. In high school, he was struck in the face by a baseball bat, an accident so severe that it fractured his skull, swelled his brain, and put him into a medically induced coma. He nearly died. What followed was a long and humbling recovery, the slow relearning of basic functions, the patient rebuilding of a body and a future that had been knocked off course in a single instant. Clear has said that this experience taught him something he would later build an entire philosophy around. When everything is taken from you, you cannot rebuild it in one grand gesture. You rebuild it one small, deliberate step at a time. He went on to become a college athlete, then a writer, and along the way he became fascinated by the question of why some people manage to change and most people do not. He started writing essays online, publishing them with a discipline that itself modeled his message. Every Monday and Thursday, a new article. He built an audience of hundreds of thousands of email subscribers long before the book existed, testing his ideas in public, refining them through feedback. By the time Atomic Habits was published in 2018, the material had already been pressure tested against a large and engaged readership. This matters because the book is not the speculation of a theorist. It is the distillation of years of writing about behavior, drawing on the work of researchers in psychology and neuroscience, while translating their findings into language an ordinary person can actually use on a Tuesday morning. It is worth placing the book in its lineage. Clear is not the first to write about habits. Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit popularized the idea of the habit loop a few years earlier. Behavioral scientists like B.J. Fogg had been studying tiny behaviors and the mechanics of change. The deeper roots reach back to behaviorism, to the study of cues and rewards, and even further to ancient ideas about how character is formed by repeated action rather than by occasional intention. What Clear did was synthesize. He took a sprawling body of research and personal experience and compressed it into a system clean enough to remember and concrete enough to apply. That act of synthesis, of making the complex usable, is arguably the book's greatest achievement, and it is also the source of some of its limitations, which we will come to later. Let us start where the book starts, with the idea of marginal gains. Clear tells the story of British professional cycling, a team that had been mediocre for decades until a new performance director, Dave Brailsford, took over with a peculiar philosophy. He called it the aggregation of marginal gains. The idea was to break down everything that goes into riding a bike and then improve each component by just 1%. They redesigned the seats for comfort, rubbed alcohol on the tires for grip, painted the inside of the team truck white to spot dust that might degrade the bikes, even tested which pillows and mattresses gave riders the best sleep on the road. No single change was decisive. But stacked together, over years, these tiny improvements transformed British cycling into a dominant force, winning a remarkable string of championships and Olympic medals. The lesson Clear draws is that we dramatically overvalue big moments and undervalue small improvements. We want the breakthrough, the dramatic overhaul, the new year that changes everything. But meaningful change is almost never the product of a single transformation. It is the product of 1,000 small ones, compounding quietly in the background. Habits, Clear writes, are the compound interest of self-improvement. The same way money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them. They seem to make little difference on any given day, and yet the impact they deliver over months and years can be enormous. This compounding cuts both ways, and it explains something painful about ordinary life. Productivity compounds. Knowledge compounds. Relationships compound. But so does stress, so does negative self-talk, so does the small daily neglect of your health. A single unhealthy meal will not ruin you, just as a single workout will not save you. But the pattern, repeated, becomes your trajectory. This is why your outcomes in life are often a lagging measure of your habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. Your bank account is a lagging measure of your financial habits. You get what you repeat. Here Clear addresses the great discouragement that derails most people, which is the gap between effort and visible result. He calls it the plateau of latent potential, and he illustrates it with an image of an ice cube sitting in a very cold room. You raise the temperature 1 degree, from 25 to 26, and nothing happens. 27, 28, 29, 30. Still nothing. The ice sits there, apparently unmoved by all your effort. Then you cross from 31 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, a change no larger than any of the others before it, and suddenly the ice begins to melt. The breakthrough that seems to arrive all at once was actually the result of all the work that came before, work that appeared to be doing nothing. This is one of the most psychologically important ideas in the book, because it names the precise place where people quit. Clear calls the early, frustrating stretch the valley of disappointment. You expect progress to be linear. You expect that if you put in effort, you will see a proportional reward, and you will see it soon. But progress is often not linear. It is more like the breaking of a dam, where pressure builds invisibly for a long time and then releases. The people who quit do so in the valley, precisely at the moment when their accumulated work is closest to paying off. They are like the person who stopped heating the ice at 31 degrees, 1 degree short of the change they were working toward, convinced that nothing was happening. What follows from this is a posture toward effort that I find genuinely useful. You are not failing when you see no results. You may simply be storing them. The work is being banked, even when the ledger seems empty. The instruction this gives us is patience, but it is a specific and earned kind of patience. It is the patience of someone who understands the mechanism, who knows that the absence of visible results is not the absence of progress. This reframing alone has probably rescued more abandoned habits than any motivational speech ever could. Now we reach what I consider the philosophical heart of the book, the distinction between goals and systems. A goal is the result you want to achieve. A system is the collection of daily processes that lead to that result. Clear makes a claim that is genuinely provocative. He argues that goals are far less important than we think, and that for the purpose of actually making progress, you should largely forget about them and focus instead on your systems. His most quoted line captures it. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. To understand why this is more than a clever phrase, consider his reasoning. First, winners and losers often have the exact same goals. Every Olympic athlete wants the gold medal. Every entrepreneur wants the successful company. The goal is not what separates those who achieve from those who do not, because the goal is essentially shared. What separates them is the system of daily practice. Second, achieving a goal is only a momentary change. If you clean a messy room, you have achieved the goal of a clean room, but if you keep the same sloppy habits that made it messy, you will soon be looking at a new pile of clutter. You are left chasing the same outcome again and again because you never changed the underlying system that produced it. The goal was always to have a clean room, but the real problem was the behavior that dirted it. Third, and most subtly, goals can restrict your happiness. When you tie your sense of success to a goal, you are telling yourself that you cannot be content until you reach it, and that once you reach it, the striving is over. A systems-first mentality offers a different relationship with progress. You fall in love with the process rather than the product, and you are free to be satisfied anytime your system is running, rather than only at the rare moment a goal is achieved. This does not mean goals are useless. Clear concedes they are good for setting direction. But systems are what make progress. The goal is the destination on the map. The system is the act of walking. And you do not get anywhere by staring at the map. If systems are the engine of the book, identity is its soul. Clear argues that there are 3 layers at which change can occur, and that most people work on the wrong one. The outermost layer is outcomes. This is what you get, the results, the weight lost, the book published, the money earned. The middle layer is processes. This is what you do, the habits and systems and routines. And the deepest layer is identity. This is what you believe, your sense of who you are, your self-image, your idea of the kind of person you are. Most people try to change from the outside in. They start with an outcome they want and try to force their behavior toward it. I want to lose weight, so I will try to eat less. I want to write a book, so I will try to write more. Clear argues that lasting change works better from the inside out, starting with identity. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, you focus on who you wish to become. The smoker who is offered a cigarette and says, "No thanks, I am trying to quit," is still operating from an old identity, still a smoker fighting against themselves. The person who says, "No thanks, I am not a smoker," has changed at the level of identity, and the behavior follows almost effortlessly because it is now simply an expression of who they are. The mechanism that links the two is beautifully simple. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes accumulate, the evidence of your new identity accumulates with them. Each time you write a page, you cast a vote for being a writer. Each time you finish a workout, you cast a vote for being an athlete. You do not need a unanimous result. You just need a majority. This is why Clear says the goal is not to read a book, but to become a reader. Not to run a marathon, but to become a runner. The outcome is what you get, but the identity is what sustains the behavior long after the initial motivation has burned away. And there is a feedback loop here that he is careful to point out. Your habits shape your identity, and your identity shapes your habits. It runs in both directions, which means you can start anywhere in the loop and let it reinforce itself. Having established the philosophy, Clear gives us the machinery, and this is the part of the book people remember most. He builds on the well-established model of the habit loop, which has 4 stages. First comes the cue, the trigger that signals an available reward. Then the craving, the motivational desire for the change of state the habit promises. Then the response, the actual habit, the thought or action you perform. And finally the reward, the satisfaction that teaches your brain to remember and repeat the loop. Cue, craving, response, reward. The cue is about noticing the reward, the craving is about wanting it, the response is about obtaining it, and the reward is the point of the whole exercise, both satisfying you and teaching you. From this loop, Clear derives 4 laws for building good habits, each corresponding to one stage. To create a good habit, you make it obvious, you make it attractive, you make it easy, and you make it satisfying. And to break a bad habit, you invert each law. You make it invisible, you make it unattractive, you make it difficult, and you make it unsatisfying. This symmetry is part of what makes the system so memorable. It is a single framework that works in both directions, a set of dials you can turn up to encourage a behavior or down to discourage one. Let me walk through each law, because the practical genius of the book lives in the details. The first law concerns the cue. Before you can change a habit, you have to become aware of it, and Clear notes that many of our habits are so automatic we no longer even notice them. He suggests a habit scorecard, simply listing your daily behaviors and marking each as positive, negative, or neutral, not to judge yourself, but to bring the invisible into view. Awareness comes first. Then come two of his most practical tools. The first is the implementation intention, which is a fancy name for a simple sentence. You decide in advance when and where you will perform a behavior. I will meditate for 1 minute at 7 a.m. in my kitchen. Research shows that people who write down exactly when and where they will act are far more likely to follow through because they have removed the moment of decision. The vague intention to exercise more becomes a specific plan with a time and a place, and specificity is what turns a wish into an action. The second tool is habit stacking, where you anchor a new habit to an existing one. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write down 3 things I am grateful for. The established habit becomes the cue for the new one, and you build a chain of behaviors that flow naturally from one to the next. Underlying all of this is the principle of environment design, which may be the most underrated idea in the book. We tend to believe our behavior is driven by motivation and willpower, but Clear argues it is shaped far more by our surroundings. We respond to the cues that are most visible. If you want to practice guitar, leave the guitar in the middle of the room. If you want to drink more water, place bottles of it where you will see them throughout the day. We are not so much fighting our environment as being quietly programmed by it, and the wise move is to make the cues of good habits obvious and unavoidable. Make the apples sit on the counter and the cookies hide in a cupboard you rarely open. The second law addresses craving, the desire that drives us to act. The more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it is to become habitual. Clear introduces a technique called temptation bundling, where you pair an action you want to do with an action you need to do. You only watch your favorite show while you are on the exercise bike. You only listen to the podcast you love while you clean the house. The pleasure of the one you want makes the one you need more appealing, and the two become linked in your mind. But the deeper insight here is social. We imitate the habits of 3 groups, Clear says: the close, the many, and the powerful. We tend to adopt the behaviors of the people around us, of our family and friends, of the broader culture we belong to, and of those we admire and aspire to be like. This means one of the most effective things you can do to build a better habit is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior, where the thing you are trying to do is simply what people there already do. Surround yourself with people who read, and reading stops feeling like a discipline and starts feeling like belonging. Nothing sustains motivation quite like membership in a tribe. We are deeply social creatures, and a behavior becomes attractive when it brings us closer to the people we want to be part of. The third law is about the response itself, and here Clear makes a point that cuts against a lot of motivational culture. We are obsessed, he says, with being in the right mood, with motivation, with finding the perfect approach. But often the most important thing is simply to reduce the friction of doing the thing at all. Habits form based on frequency, not on time. It is not how long you have been practicing a habit that matters most, but how many times you have repeated it. And so the goal is to make the good behavior as easy as possible to repeat, and the bad behavior as hard as possible to start. This is the law of least effort. Human beings are naturally drawn to the option that requires the least work. So you prime your environment to make future actions easier. You lay out your gym clothes the night before. You prepare healthy food in advance so the easy choice is also the good one. And you can run this in reverse to break bad habits by adding friction. If you want to watch less television, unplug it and take the batteries out of the remote after each use. The few extra seconds of effort are often enough to interrupt the automatic reach. The crown jewel of this section is the 2-minute rule. When you start a new habit, Clear says, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. Read before bed becomes read 1 page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out my yoga mat. Run 3 miles becomes put on my running shoes. The point is not that 1 page or 1 set of shoes will get you fit or well read. The point is to master the art of showing up. A habit must be established before it can be improved. You cannot optimize a behavior that does not exist. So you scale it down until it is almost impossible to fail, you make the act of starting effortless, and you let the momentum carry you forward. Standardize before you optimize. You cannot make a habit better if it is not there to begin with, and most of the battle is simply becoming the kind of person who shows up. The fourth law concerns the reward, and it introduces a crucial complication about time. The first three laws increase the odds that a behavior will be performed this time. The fourth law increases the odds that it will be repeated next time, because what is rewarded is repeated and what is punished is avoided. The problem is that the rewards of good habits are usually delayed, while the rewards of bad habits are usually immediate. The cigarette feels good right now, while its harm arrives in some distant decade. The workout hurts right now, while its benefits accumulate slowly and invisibly. We live in what Clear calls a delayed return environment, but we evolved brains tuned for an immediate return world, and this mismatch is the source of much of our self-defeat. The solution is to give yourself a small, immediate reward when you complete a good habit, something that makes the delayed payoff feel a little closer. And one of the most satisfying rewards of all is simply seeing progress, which is why habit tracking is so powerful. Marking an X on a calendar each day you complete a habit turns the act of doing it into a visible chain you do not want to break. The tracking itself becomes rewarding, a small hit of satisfaction every time you make the mark. Clear pairs this with a rule of recovery that I think is one of the most forgiving and practical ideas in the entire book. Never miss twice. Missing once is an accident. Anyone can have a bad day, a disruption, a slip. But missing twice is the beginning of a new habit, the habit of not doing it. So you allow yourself the occasional lapse without guilt, and you simply refuse to let it become two. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to get back on track quickly, because the people who ultimately succeed are not the ones who never fail, but the ones who fail and return before the failure can take root. The book does not end with the four laws. In its later chapters, Clear turns to the question of how to go from merely good to genuinely great, and he offers some honest qualifications that I respect. The first is about talent and genes. He acknowledges, without fatalism, that our biology shapes which habits come easily to us. The trick is not to pick the habit that is objectively best, but the one that is best for you, the one suited to your natural inclinations. He talks about choosing the right field of competition, the arena where the odds are in your favor, where your particular blend of traits becomes an advantage rather than a handicap. Pick a game where your strengths are the rules, and habit building stops feeling like a war against your own nature. The second is the Goldilocks rule, the idea that humans experience peak motivation when they work on tasks right at the edge of their current abilities. Not so easy that they are boring, not so hard that they are demoralizing, but just manageable enough to stay engaging. This is the zone where habits remain interesting over the long haul, which matters because the greatest threat to a long-running habit is not failure but boredom. Anyone can stay disciplined when it is exciting. The mark of a true professional, Clear says, is the ability to stick with the routine even when the novelty has worn off, to fall in love with boredom, to keep showing up on the gray, unremarkable days when nothing feels new. And then comes the qualification I find most intellectually honest. Habits have a downside. The very automaticity that makes them powerful also makes them invisible, and once a behavior becomes automatic, we stop paying attention to how we do it. We get good enough, and then we coast, repeating the same way forever without improving. Clear's answer is to combine habits with deliberate practice and with regular reflection and review. The habit gets you to show up and gives you the foundation. Deliberate practice, the conscious effort to refine and improve, is what builds mastery on top of it. So he recommends periodic review, an honest accounting of what is working and what is not, to make sure your habits keep serving you rather than quietly calcifying into mediocrity. This is where I think the book is at its most mature. It does not pretend habits are a complete answer. It frames them as the foundation upon which conscious improvement is built. So, what do we carry away from all of this? Let me gather the threads. The first and largest takeaway is that small changes compound, and that you should respect the math of incremental progress far more than the drama of the grand gesture. 1% better, sustained, beats a heroic effort abandoned. Trust the compounding even when, especially when, you cannot yet see the results, because you are likely in the valley of disappointment where the work is being banked invisibly. The second takeaway is to fix your attention on systems rather than goals. The goal sets the direction, but the system makes the progress. Do not ask only what you want to achieve. Ask what daily process would make that achievement an inevitable byproduct, and then fall in love with that process. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. The third takeaway is that real change is identity change. The most durable habits are the ones that flow from a sense of who you are. So decide the kind of person you want to become, and let each small action be a vote for that identity. Do not chase the outcome of writing a book. Become a writer, and the book will follow from what a writer naturally does. The fourth takeaway is the practical machinery, the 4 laws. To build a good habit, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. To break a bad one, make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. Underneath these are the tools you can use tomorrow morning. Design your environment so good cues are visible and bad ones are hidden. Use implementation intentions and habit stacking to anchor new behaviors to specific times and existing routines. Shrink any new habit to a 2-minute version so the only goal is to show up. Surround yourself with people for whom your desired behavior is normal. Track your habits to make progress visible and never miss twice. And the fifth takeaway is one of attitude. The goal is not perfection but persistence. You will slip. The system is built to absorb your slips, to let you return quickly, to value getting back on track over never falling off. Master the art of showing up, fall in love with boredom, and remember that you are not trying to win a single dramatic battle. You are trying to cast enough votes, over a long enough time, that the person you want to be becomes simply the person you are. I want to close with a word of both endorsement and caution, because a thoughtful reading deserves both. The great strength of Atomic Habits is its usability. Clear has taken a tangled body of behavioral science and personal struggle and shaped it into something a person can actually hold in their mind and act on. The frameworks are clean, the stories are memorable, and the advice is concrete in a way that most self-improvement writing never manages. If you have ever wanted to change something about yourself and not known where to begin, this book hands you a place to begin, which is no small gift. The caution is the mirror image of that strength. Because the system is so clean, it can make change sound more mechanical than it sometimes is. Not every obstacle in a human life is a poorly designed habit. Some are circumstances, structures, illnesses, injustices, and constraints that no amount of environment design will dissolve. A person working 3 jobs does not lack the right cue. The framework is a powerful tool, but it is a tool for the things that are within your control, and wisdom lies partly in knowing where that boundary falls. There is also a fair criticism that much of the book synthesizes ideas that existed before it, repackaged with great skill. That is true, but I would argue that the synthesis is itself valuable, that taking scattered knowledge and making it usable is a genuine contribution, not a lesser one. What stays with me in the end is the book's quiet reframing of what a life actually is. We tend to imagine that we are defined by our biggest moments, the decisions and dramas that make for good stories. Clear gently insists otherwise. You are, he suggests, the sum of your small and repeated actions, the accumulation of 10,000 ordinary mornings. Your habits are not just things you do. They are, over time, the architecture of who you become. And there is something genuinely hopeful in that. It means you do not have to wait for a transformation, a breakthrough, a perfect moment of motivation. You can begin with something almost laughably small today and trust the compounding to do its patient work. The ice is sitting at 31 degrees, and the next small degree of effort, the one that looks like it is changing nothing, may be the one that changes everything. So the question the book leaves you with is not whether you can summon some great act of will. It is far simpler and far more answerable than that. It is just this. What is the one small vote you are willing to cast today for the person you want to become?